Hello, everyone, and welcome to our THE student webinar about clearing. I'm Jamie with THE Student, and we're here today to really break down the clearing process for students who have applied to universities in the UK and may be feeling a bit overwhelmed about what the next few months will hold. I'm joined today by a panel of experts, and at the end of our discussion, we'll also be joined by two representatives from Unite Students to specifically discuss how to navigate your accommodation options if you're going through clearing. Each year, thousands of places on courses at universities in the UK are allocated through clearing. It's the way that universities fill vacancies on courses and the way that students can secure a place if your plans have changed or if your grades didn't quite turn out as expected. Today, we'll talk about the timeline for clearing, how the process works, who can use it, and some tips for managing through the process. We know that you may not be thinking about clearing quite yet, so I should add that this session will be available on THE Student, along with lots of other resources, and you can revisit these at any time in the coming months. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A function, and we will try to answer those as we go along. I'm thrilled to have a great panel with me today. We have Peter Shelley, the head of student recruitment at the University of Surrey, Amy Smith, associate director of admissions and student recruitment at Nottingham Trent University, and Rebecca Evans, head of careers and higher education advising at Cheltenham College. Thanks for being here, everyone. We're really happy to have you here. Rebecca, I think we'll start with you with sort of just the basic, obvious question. What is clearing and who is it for?
Who aren't different reasons. The majority of students find themselves clearing because they haven't met the conditions of their offers on results day. Another reason that they might end up in clearing is because they have changed their mind perhaps about a course, and they might have made it two institutions, their firm and insurance offers, the firm and insurance decisions, but then they've changed their mind in the 8 months between submitting their application and they might want to choose a course. So they might self-release clearing as well. It's also for students who aren't holding offers, having applied to UCAS, they may have received 5 rejections and are therefore.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, from a university's perspective, what purpose does clearing serve and how does a university view the process?
Yeah, so clearing for us now is just another way for students to apply. I think that's true across the sector. There are more vacancies than there ever have been for the last couple of years. I've worked in admissions now for 13 years at various different institutions, and I've never known as many opportunities available in clearing as there are now. So I think it's worth saying that particularly if your parents are involved in your application or your teachers, there may be some sort of myths around clearing being this desperate scramble just for people who haven't met their conditions or just for people who've maybe not done as well as they've expected. That's not the case anymore. There are so many really high quality courses available, so don't be afraid about using clearing. I think there's no sort of stigma attached to it at all. It is just a legitimate application route for students now.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And as Rebecca said, you know, it's not just for students who didn't make their offers. I mean, it's for students who changed their minds or for students whose circumstances have changed. And
Absolutely.
It's, as you said, a great way to have access to lots of great opportunities that are available out there for students. We know that this year is different than any other year. I'm sure we also said that last year. We continue to find ourselves in sort of different circumstances than I think, you know, we're all accustomed to. And of course, for most students, this will be the first time they're going through the process, so they won't really know any differently. But Peter, I wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about like what can students expect over the coming months between now and August, September? You know, how does the process work? What is the timeline, and what should their expectations be as far as how things will move along?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we do know that so many things have changed over the last 2 years. The way that a lot of students, most students are getting their results is different this year. The date of A-level results is a little bit different this year. As far as possible, UCAS and universities are trying to follow a very similar process that we've had in previous years, because it's a process, you're absolutely right, Jamie, that most students go through this process once, but universities are very familiar with receiving results, confirming places, offering places through clearing. So we're following a very similar process, and we're all set up to run that smoothly. We know it's a stressful time potentially for students, so we're all prepared to give the best advice that we can. So to some extent, the process is very similar to previous years. So if I just broadly explain that process,
Yep.
Of course, it depends a little bit on which qualification students have taken. So a large number take A-levels, but many students go to university with IB, BTECs, a whole range of qualifications. Essentially, the universities receive the results, the students' results, and we are then able to confirm students' places. Now, if a student's met the conditions of an offer, if I use A-levels as a very simple example, if the offer is BBB and the student gets BBB, we confirm that place, it becomes an unconditional firm place at the university, as a guaranteed place. If a student's one grade below, it depends how everyone else has done, it depends how many places we've got on the course, it's still very possible to get a place confirmed. And then we will show our results via UCAS. So that student who's, if it's a BBB offer, if you get your result, you'll go unconditional on UCAS. If you just meet the requirements of your firm choice, your insurance choice will look at your results, and the same process applies. Hopefully they'll confirm your place. Now, if your firm choice and your insurance choice don't confirm your place, maybe your grades are just below what they were looking for, that's when you are in clearing, because you can be in clearing if you don't have a confirmed place at a university. For many students, for most students, this will be Tuesday, the 10th of August, if they're doing A-levels, because that's the big clearing day. But actually clearing goes from early July right to the end of October. So essentially the process is universities receive the grades, we confirm or don't confirm the place, and depending on that decision is whether the student is then in clearing or not. And as Rebecca outlined at the start, you can have a place confirmed, but if you do better than you expected or you change your mind, there are still ways of going into clearing to choose a course at another university. So we're trying to make it as similar as we can to previous years, because we've got so much experience of running that process.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about what a student has to do, what actions they need to take in the clearing process. When Rebecca and I talked about this briefly before the session, we're talking about all the phone calls that students are making and how frantic and stressful that can be. So I want to really prepare students for what those days around results day look like, what they should be prepared to do, what kinds of conversations they should be prepared to have with universities. Rebecca, do you want to start and just kind of talk to us from the student's perspective about what that really looks like?
Absolutely. Well, as Peter said, clearing opens early July, so universities will start to post and publicise the places that they have available in clearing. The students aren't going to be able to apply for those until they know they're in clearing, which they won't be able to do until they've had their results. So that's not going to happen until results day for those students that have applied to the traditional route. But if perhaps a student is feeling that in these weird times that they may not have reached the conditions of their offers, or things haven't gone so well in perhaps some of the assessments they may have done in schools, or in some of the coursework that is being used as evidence by some of the schools, then they can start to prepare, and they can actually start to look at clearing and see what's available. So it might be that if they're looking at a course that is, I don't know, their firm or insurance offer is maybe AAA and AAB, perhaps, but they feel that things haven't gone very well, they could very well start looking at the clearing lists from July to see what's available at around the BBB level, perhaps. Just to sort of start to weigh up what's out there and what might, and start to make a list perhaps of places that on results day, if that is the case, that they can contact those institutions to find out whether those institutions could look at their grades, but also what they have to offer as students. So I think that's really important. You can sort of loosely prepare for clearing if you think that's somewhere that you may end up. I think destigmatizing clearing, as Amy said, it is really, really crucial. It can be brought, but only because you can get frustrated, because you have to be prepared to wait. You will probably be on hold to the unis. They are accepting hundreds of calls. But you have to stay calm, and you have to be prepared, and you have to be prepared to wait, and you probably will be on hold for a while. I think having things like simple things like having a pen and paper, because you're going to be given lots of information, having a copy of your UCAS personal statement next to you. If you're applying for a similar course for clearing, having a UCAS personal statement with you, because some clearing calls can be a very simple 10-minute discussion about grades and grades, a very brief overview of why the course, but some clearing calls can turn into a sort of mini interview. So if you are, I don't know what it's going to be. So if you are applying for some of this, let's think about jotting down some ideas about why you're looking at a different course. Sell yourself over the phone.
Rebecca, we're having just a bit of a hard time hearing you, so I'm going to recap. That's okay, don't worry. I'm going to recap a little bit of what you said, and then I'm going to pass it over to Amy to kind of pick up, because I know Amy will have the same tips and advice that you've had. But I think one of the things you said that I really want to highlight is that, you don't have to put so much pressure on just kind of like the days immediately around results day or on a single day, that you can actually start really thinking about this and preparing and researching, seeing what's out there. Just even having that understanding of what your options might be, you can start looking in July and have a sense of that, and that can take a lot of the pressure off of what may feel like a very stressful time. I mean, just the anticipation of that sort of mid-August date, I think, can be really stressful for students. But there are loads of things you can do ahead of time. And then I think the other tips that you mentioned, in particular, like having information about the course handy, having your UCAS personal statement beside you and available when you're calling universities, so that you easily have something that you can reference to talk about your interests and your experiences and why that course is a good fit for you. I think, a key to this whole process too is students having confidence when they speak to universities, and part of that is certainly just being prepared. Amy, do you want to pick up on any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So doing your research is the most important thing, even just for something as silly to take the pressure off as getting the clearing phone number for a university that you might be interested in advance, because a lot of institutions will have their clearing telephone number on the website from the day that clearing opens. So that's the 5th of July. Some people will have it on there well in advance of that. So if you're interested in a particular institution, look at their website, look at the courses that they've got available, note that phone number down, so that as soon as you get your results on results day, you can give them a call and go through the application process. Another potentially obvious bit of advice is to make sure you've got your results with you. So you can only apply through clearing once you've received your examination results. So make sure you've got your A-levels, BTEC, IB, whatever qualification it is. But also you may be asked about GCSEs or level 2 qualifications, particularly in English and maths. So make sure you've got those grades to hand. Pen and paper is key, because they'll be giving you information on the phone as well as asking you questions. And then finally, just make sure that when you're making that clearing phone call, or, there's other ways to apply through clearing nowadays. You can apply via online application forms at some universities, but primarily it is over the phone. Make sure it's you that makes that call and not your parents or a teacher or anybody else. It has to be you. We can only talk to you, and it makes an easier conversation if you call us, and because we want to get to know you, and we can't discuss your application with anybody except yourself. So make sure you're ready, your phone's charged, and you're good to go to have that conversation with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Amy. Peter, we have a question from the audience that I'm hoping you might be able to help us answer. And the student who submitted it said it's not exactly in line with clearing, but what advice would you give to a student who's interested in a variety of courses? I think this actually in some ways can also apply to clearing. As we referenced earlier, students may have changed their minds since January when they submitted applications, and they might be thinking, actually, I'm not quite sure if the course that I applied to is the right fit for me. It's a somewhat unique circumstance in the UK compared to other countries that students might be considering, and that they do need to apply to a specific course and have a fairly clear sense of what they want to study. So, Peter, what would you advise to a student who is, finds themselves in the summer months second guessing the course selection that they made, or feeling like they may want to change their mind about courses?
Yeah, I mean, and that is one reason that clearing is there. So students do use clearing to change the course that they want to do. I would say, and this might sound a strange thing for me to say because I work at university, as does Amy, but I think the choice of subject is even more important than the choice of university. So start with the subject, and really narrow down which subject you want to look at, to study, and then choose based on the university. It's very difficult to choose between universities if you've not chosen your subject. And the way to narrow down your subject would be to look at university websites, look at the content of those courses, the careers that people go on to, check if you're something you're passionate about. If you're looking now, you may be able to visit some universities, a lot of universities have a facility to talk to students online about the course. So do your research to narrow down your subject. I think secondly, particularly if you're in a situation now where you're at the end of your A-levels or IB or your high school qualifications, double check the entry requirements. So a lot of subjects, for example, science subjects may require maths or physics or chemistry, so they'll have some mandatory subjects. So when narrowing down your subjects you might apply through clearing, you want to be sure your high school qualifications match the course you're looking to do. So I would narrow down subject first, and then once you've chosen that subject, then do your shortlisting of universities. But just double checking you have the right qualifications for that course, and then of course talking to your school, to Rebecca and colleagues in a similar role at other schools as well.
Yeah, flipping over to Rebecca, I'm sure you've worked with students who have found themselves in this exact situation, and I hope that one of the outcomes of today's session is just a reassuring message that everything will turn out fine. That this is students end up where they're meant to end up, and that there are wonderful places available at wonderful universities for students through this process. Again, the message of sort of destigmatizing clearing, that it can be for students who've just changed their mind, or who've exceeded their results. But Rebecca, what I would love to hear from you about just some of the experiences you've had working with students, and the success stories of students going through the process and ending up at universities.
Yeah, absolutely. I was having a look through our statistics from last year, and I've never known a student not to get a place that they're happy with through clearing. All of our students who end up in clearing achieve a place and are happy with it and go on to study at that institution. So that's the first thing to say. We had students last year. There was one student who applied for law, and in the 8 months between applying and achieving his results, he changed his mind. He decided he wanted a breadth of subject place on a liberal arts course at Bristol. We've had students pick up places on law courses in Sheffield. That was last year as well. Aerospace engineering at Leeds, international management at Queen Mary's in London. It's for a whole range of universities. We know that Oxford and Cambridge don't appear in clearing, but aside from those two, I think it's, and every year the list is different. So it's just making sure that you do your research to see what's out there. But it can be a really wholly positive experience, particularly for those who perhaps have changed their mind about their course. But generally speaking, it can be a bit fraught. But as long as you're calm and you're prepared and you are happy to wait on the phone, then it can be a real success story.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, there's a question that you perfectly answered in the Q&A, but I would love to make sure that we answer it verbally for students who maybe missed it in the written
Sure.
Q&A. A student asked, if I have a firm and an insurance choice on UCAS and I meet their requirements, but I decide to withdraw from both, will I be able to enter clearing? And can you shed some light on that particular question for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you log on to UCAS Track on the morning that you get your results and you notice that you've been accepted by your firm or your insurance, or indeed both, you can decline your place on UCAS Track. You don't need to contact those universities to ask them to be released or anything like that. You can decline your place on UCAS Track yourself, and that will automatically put you in clearing. Now, it is worth saying just before you do press that button that I would advise you to contact the university that you're interested in to make sure that they're willing to offer you a place before you give up the opportunities that you've got on your UCAS track. So just make sure that when you do press that decline your place, you definitely want to do that. If you make a mistake, we all do it. Sometimes people press the button thinking that it means something else. Then contact the university that is your firm or insurance, and they'll be able to help you hopefully get that place back. But so yeah, don't panic if you do press the wrong button. There's usually always something that we can do to help you.
And
Yeah.
Jamie, maybe if I could just jump in to explain how the vast majority of universities clearing offers work, just to kind of reassure students for that decision-making timeline. When you ring up a university, they'll talk to you about your qualifications, and then based on that, they'll make an offer of a place. That will be followed up via an email. So you'll get an email from the university saying, yes, we offer you a place on this course at University of Surrey or Nottingham Trent with the grades that you've told us. And that email is essentially a guarantee of a place if you choose it. And typically have it'd be a time-bound offer. So you need to choose us in the next 48 hours or 24 hours. You can get that kind of an offer via the phone and via email from several universities. And when you choose on UCAS, you can only select one. So it's always good to make sure you have that email from the university before you then choose your UCAS, just in case there's been a misunderstanding. But you'll get an email to confirm the place, and then you choose your UCAS. And that gives you a little bit of time. So don't just ring one university. I would get offers from a few universities, and then over the following 24, 48 hours, just choose which one you want to choose via UCAS.
That is a really good point, actually, that even though you'll get an email follow-up offering you a place or confirming that you've been offered a place, or however it might be phrased, you as the applicant still then need to go onto UCAS Track and select which course you want to take part in. So just because you've got that email, you still then need to log on to UCAS Track and add that your chosen course as a clearing choice as soon as that opens. So that's from 2 o'clock on A-level results day. So just make sure you do that, again, within the time limit as specified in your email.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked a little bit already about the things that students need to have on hand when they're calling universities, but there's a question from the audience about like, what are they going to ask me on the call, and what details should we have on hand? We've talked a little bit about that, but Peter, can you tell us, when a student rings up your university and wants to speak to someone about clearing, what are those conversations generally like? What should students expect to be asked? And that, of course, may vary, but what kinds of things can we help prepare them for?
Yeah, I can explain how it works at Surrey, and it's very similar at most UK, perhaps close to all UK universities. And the vast majority of calls are relatively straightforward calls. So if a student rings up, we have 2 different call centers. We have like a triage system. A student rings up and we will say which course. We'll just check, you've come through to our clearing line, check they're in the right place. Which course are you interested in? And the student say, I'm interested in business management. We will ask the student what qualifications do they have, and what grades did they achieve at A-levels or other qualifications at GCSE. If those grades are not in line with what we're looking for, we'll say, I'm afraid we're not able to offer a place. If they are in line with what we're looking for or very close to it, we will then put the student through to another call center, which has our admissions team who have a slightly more detailed conversation. They will talk through the exact qualifications, the grades, the level 2 or GCSE qualifications. And then in most cases, based on that, Let's say, again, if we're looking for BBB and a student has BBB at A level, in the majority of cases, we would then offer a place via email, as we've just discussed before. There will be some cases where it's either a borderline case, or maybe it's a student who's changing from one course in UCAS to another course, where the program director or an admissions tutor may want to have a conversation with the student. And that's where some of the points that Rebecca was talking about before, about knowing about your personal statement or why you want to change the course. So be prepared for that. But the majority of the calls are really about which course do you want to do, what grades did you achieve, and then we go into a little bit more detail if it's kind of borderline, or just to double check we've got all the details right. That's 80%, 90% of the calls that we receive from students.
Amy, would you say that's accurate from your perspective as well at Nottingham Trent?
Yeah, it's very similar. So we try and make the majority of our offers over the phone at that first point. It's worth mentioning that some courses will still require an interview or a portfolio. So just because it has an interview and a portfolio in main cycle doesn't mean that in clearing it won't, particularly for where that's really important. So things like nursing, paramedicine, art and design, anything where we need more information than just your qualification. So we need to see your talent and ability in a particular area. I would also just make sure that you're willing to have potentially a conversation about a different way of getting to where you want to go. So if, for example, I mean, we've talked a lot about different subjects, but if, for example, you were interested in engineering and you didn't have the required subject for a straight bachelor degree in engineering, you might be offered a foundation degree or foundation year as part of that conversation in clearing. Same with if you're interested in a subject like medicine. If medicine is not in clearing, you might be offered biomedical sciences. There's still routes into the career that you're interested in. You don't necessarily have to go the straight line medicine route. There are other ways to get to where you want to go. So just be open to having that conversation. Same with subjects. So if you've narrowed down your subject choices to, say, you want to do business, you might be offered over the phone accounting and finance or business management, or a wide variety of subjects that potentially you might not have ever even heard of, but based on your profile, they may be really interesting to you, and you might be really successful as a result. So don't just assume that because you can't get the course that you thought you wanted or the specific subject that you thought you wanted, that's the end of your journey. There's always options, again, to transfer in year or transfer at the end of the first year. There's all sorts of things that you can do. So once you've decided where you want to go and broadly what you want to study, just be ready to have that conversation about other options, particularly for those really popular courses.
Yeah, Rebecca, I'm sure you would agree that being open-minded is a big part of the whole process, and sort of going into it with an open mind to other universities, but also, as Amy just said, to other avenues and other routes to your ultimate goal.
So combinations as well. So it might be that you're looking at politics, but there are no spaces available on politics, but on politics and international relations, there are spaces. So it's about being a little bit flexible with your thinking, and being able to see the positives in those and make those decisions there and then.
Yeah. Just briefly before we wrap up this conversation, there's one question that has just come in that I want to make sure we cover, because we will have a lot of international students who have joined us today, but also who will watch this as clearing gets a bit closer. And I just want to be really explicitly clear with students: is the clearing application process the same for international students? And I think a key point to that question is also that a lot of international students are coming to study in the UK with different qualifications than just A-levels or IB. And so although the process is likely the same, Amy, can you offer any words of advice or reassurance to international students in particular?
Yeah, so it's likely broadly the same. You're searching for a vacancy on a program. Universities are really well accustomed to dealing with international qualifications, but it may be that when you make your clearing phone call, your case has to be referred to a particular international specialist to make sure that you've got the equivalent grades that we're looking for in the qualification if it's something that we're not used to. But broadly, the process will be the same. You're searching for a place. If the course has got vacancies, then you can apply in the same way. One thing that might be slightly different are the questions that you're asked on the phone call. So particularly if you're coming from a country where English is not the first language, you might be asked for proof of your English language proficiency, so an IELTS test, for example, and that will form part of that conversation or the follow-up afterwards. You'll also be asked for proof of your qualifications, undoubtedly, so usually just scanned copies are fine, just to, again, verify that what you've told us over the phone you've achieved. We are confident that you have achieved that, because we don't get the results through UCAS in the same way as we do with UK qualifications. But yeah, broadly the same.
Excellent. Thank you. A big, huge thank you to Rebecca, Amy, and Peter for joining us for this quick but very effective conversation about clearing. Hopefully we've cleared up any of the stress or confusion or sort of myths around the clearing process. As I mentioned, this session, along with tons of other resources about clearing, are available on THE Student, and they are there for students to revisit at any point in the next few months as we get closer and closer to results day. Massive thanks to you guys for your expertise and for your guidance and your reassurance. I would now like to introduce Bernadette and Chloe from Unite Students. Of course, for students who are going through clearing, another sort of element of this is your accommodation, where you're going to live. Your university may change, the city you are planning on studying in may change. So there's a lot of questions around that, and we'd like to spend just a few minutes here discussing those. Chloe and Bernadette, thanks for joining me. And Bernadette, we'll start with you. Can students still book accommodation during clearing? Is it too late? What happens if they go through clearing and they completely change universities and locations in August and are scrambling for accommodation?
Hi, everybody. Yes, so it is not too late for students to apply for accommodation during clearing. So it's absolutely fine. It's just to be aware that in the UK, there are some cities where there are more availabilities than others for student accommodation. So for example, there are not very many, but a few cities in the UK like Bristol, Edinburgh, Nottingham, for example, where it can be a bit more difficult towards the end of summer to find accommodation, just because there aren't that many in the city. But for most of the other cities in the UK, it's absolutely fine. What we do is just we recommend the students to start looking now anyway, even if they don't have full confirmation on where they are going to go. Now is still good time to start looking. We also recommend the students to keep checking, because most of the accommodation provider will show on their platform when the properties are getting sold out or when the availability is becoming low, and this can give the students a good indication as well of how much demand there is for a specific location. On our side, we have dedicated teams in summer to deal with all the requests we get during clearing, focusing on customer service and also web chat functionalities on our website to advise the students between now and until September. So this is also a great way to get instant feedback on what is available and if there is still a lot of availability or very few. So the students are really welcome to contact our team, and I guess it's the same, for all the private student accommodation that you can find in the UK. We are all very used to deal with clearing bookings. For us, it's actually a very busy time of the year, because we understand that there are a lot of students looking for accommodation at this time of the year. So it's definitely something that we are very, very familiar on our side as well. For the students who prefer to look at shared houses and private accommodation, the main advice we can give is to stick to the most main mainstream platforms that are reliable and where you will not be victim of fraud or anything. So stick to the platforms like Zoopla, Rightmove, On the Market, so all the big ones that you can see, and just be mindful of the smaller ones that can be quite misleading. But again, even on the private sector, you will find some options in summer. One thing that it's very important to check, and that we can discuss a little bit, is further, it's what are the options to cancel in case you need to change your mind or in case your plan changes. But yes, in terms of availability, it shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point about canceling or plans changing. One of those situations may be a student who doesn't get accepted to their first choice university, and they'd maybe already booked accommodation preemptively in that city, but now they're going to a different city and to a different university. Chloe, if that happens, is a student able to transfer their booking to another city? I know we can really only speak specifically about the policies for Unite students, but of course that's a good guide for students in terms of understanding what to expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, here at Unite Students, we would be willing to transfer that booking to another city or another location. But of course, we would just ask the student to provide us with a bit of proof that they have been accepted to a different university in a different location. And simply we would just ask that from the student to show us that they are transferring to another city, just so we can see it. Of course, this is all dependent on availability. So as Bernadette mentioned before, there is some kind of cities where the accommodation is perhaps they haven't got as much accommodation as perhaps other cities have, and therefore that would be the only thing that I would be aware of when you are looking at this and wanting to cancel before looking at an alternative. Just have that in mind, that the availability in another city might not be the same. But yes, we would be able to honour and offer that transfer to another city. And that is quite a common feature for most student accommodation. One recommendation I would have is double check the terms and conditions. So like Bernadette has mentioned, before, if you have already made a booking and you've preempted where you would like to go, but obviously you've got another suggestion maybe when clearing comes, just double check the terms and conditions at the point of making that booking to see. I know that in private landlords, that is different, and that's something that I cannot advise on, but I would say that maybe a replacement would be required to be found, or loss of a deposit, for example.
Absolutely. Bernadette, along those same lines, what are the cancellation policies for accommodation? So for example, if a student has booked accommodation, but their plans change and maybe there's not availability in the new city they're going to, or maybe they've got friends who already have accommodation that they're going to, live with buddies in the different city that they're going to, and they want to cancel their accommodation altogether. What should they be looking out for in terms of cancellation policies? What should they be aware of?
Yes, so again, here I think there will be some difference between the type of accommodation that the students are looking for. So for those who are looking at shared houses and renting a flat from a private landlord, just be very careful when you sign to see what the exit clause could be. So in that specific case where, for example, you don't get your fair choice and you need to go to another city with a private landlord, there could be some financial implications in terms of loss of your deposit, or even in some cases, loss of the first months of bookings that you were required to pay to secure that accommodation. Whereas with private student accommodation providers, so like Unite, we are quite used to dealing with this. So we have actually some cancellation policies to support students with these kind of changes. So for UK first year students who don't get the grades that they needed to go to university, we would, upon receipt of the evidence of that, we would cancel the booking on what we call no place, no pay policy. And for all the international students who are coming to the UK for the first time, we also apply this no place, no pay policy. So if the students fail their language test, for example, that was a criteria to be accepted into the university course, upon receipt on the grades, we will cancel the booking as well without any penalty. We will refund any payment that has been made until that point. And we also have a policy called no visa, no pay. So if for any reason a visa application got rejected, when we receive the proof of the rejection, we will also cancel the booking. So again, this is some additional flexibility that the students can have with student accommodation providers in comparison to the private landlord market. So it's just very important to be mindful of what these conditions are, because otherwise you would be liable for the rent.
Yeah, absolutely. That degree of flexibility can be really important and reassuring for students. Chloe, lastly, I just want to talk about students who do book their accommodation during clearing. They get their place, they find accommodation. What are the payment terms like for students who book during clearing? Are there any special terms or conditions that they need to be aware of at that stage?
Okay, yeah, so for example, with Unite students, we would take, when at the point of booking at any time, so not just necessarily clearing, but at any point of time, we would take an advance rental payment. And this advance rental payment is roughly around £200 to £250. And this would secure the room for that customer or student, etc. And that's for anyone if you're international or domestic here in the UK. As we get closer to clearing, that advance rental payment will no longer be taken. It will just be your rental instalment as you come close to the payment dates of what you would normally pay. And this typically falls in line with either a student loan, or we fall in line with when you arrive in the UK, or when we expect those payments to be. And they are very similar for every accommodation, not just here at Unite Students. And payment can be made on anything really. It can be made by a debit card, credit card, bank transfer, union pay, and there are all these sort of ways of making payment to make it easy for students, whatever way they're paying. Of course, instalments is something how we take payment. We know that some students are unable to pay up front, and we do accept instalments, and that is very common for all of accommodation providers, including landlords and private rental as well, not just our sector, which is PBSA. And it can be quite flexible depending on what the reasoning. So if you're doing a scholarship or you're being paid for by an internship, if that's paid monthly, there is ways around that. It's obviously just asking to see what that proof is, that we are going to be sure that that money's coming in monthly, etc., rather than believing that it isn't. But yeah, there is definitely flexibility in making those payments that suit the student's needs, student loan, finances, etc.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for shedding some light on the accommodation options and policies around clearing. I think as we discussed in the earlier conversation, it can be a bit of a stressful time for students. And so knowing that the flexibility around accommodation, the ability to change your plans and change your booking from one city to another if that's necessary, is incredibly helpful for students and helps alleviate some of the stress and anxiety. And of course, another big thank you to all of our panelists who joined us. We hope that this session has provided some reassuring words for students about the clearing process. And as I said, there's tons of resources at timeshighereducation.com/student, where you'll be able to find the recording of this session, but of course also articles and student perspectives specifically about clearing, which will help you as we go through the process. Thanks everyone, and we will see you at the next THE student event. Bye-bye.